You're live.
All righty. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the first ever simulcast. We're actually broadcasting this to my YouTube channel, the Drive Through Games YouTube channel, and Marty and Adam and Tony's Twitch channel, the Rolling Dice and Taking Names Twitch channel. So as you can
You could claim the Twitch channel. That's fine.
Adam's Twitch channel.
That's fine. He would draw more than I would. Yeah. So we'll see if what this stream holds up, Joel. We've got simulcasts and tier lists that we're going to be interacting with, and I'm using new software that runs into OBS. It could all blow up at any time.
It might. I can see it. Everything looks like it's live. So as you can tell, hopefully from the description and my constant social media blasting, we're going to try to do like kind of a combo Q&A of Age of Sigmar 3rd edition. We've both got the new book and everything. And then also we're going to have some fun and tier list all the factions. I think there's like 22 factions or something like that, but not based on like competitive viability, but more like just coolness factor, what we like, the models, the lore, and all that kind of fun stuff. Just kind of a fun conversation about that.
I assume it'll be less heated than the Marvel movie tier list.
I think so.
Okay.
That sounds
I'm pretty sure it will be.
I'm glad I wasn't in on that one.
If you guys missed it, we had some fun doing all the MCU movies from like Hulk to the latest Spider-Man. It was a lot of fun.
Yep.
So looks like there's people in the chat and whatnot, and try to keep an eye on all this stuff. Marty's managing the technical side. So you guys have had a chance to look at the new book, right?
Yes.
Adam's looked at it more than I have.
Yeah, mostly. I'm pretty much reading it cover to cover, more or less.
Nice.
Have you even got to the rules yet?
No.
Okay.
No.
So
there's where
what's cool, and I don't know if you know this, Adam, they released the core rules yesterday. So for anybody that's interested in just the core rules of Age of Sigmar, it's out there for free.
Yeah, I did see that. You can download it for free. I think they just put it up as a PDF, which is very cool of them to do. And I know we got to get ready to jump in the tier list, but I do like the way the rules are laid out now numerically. I love the subsection things that like FFG and some like war games do. You know, it's like go to section 12.3. Yeah.
That's like perfect. I know exactly where 12.3 is.
And additionally, just the way they have it laid out in the book, they have ribbons on the side, and then it's just right there. So it's easy to pull out and just find what you need.
Yeah.
Very easy to navigate.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that ribbon thing because it's, like a Rio Grande game or a Leah games and all the Steffenfeld games, they all have that stuff. So it's just easy when you go back. Instead of trying to comb through a paragraph, you just go bam, right to that little bullet. And if you need more clarity, you go to the the meat of the text there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. So we're just going to start. I think we should just start tier list and stuff and just get into some banter.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Do you want me to go ahead and get started?
Yeah.
All right. What's the first one? It's Oryx, right?
No.
What is it?
That's Sons of Behemat. Yeah, little thumbnails are a little squished there.
Yeah. So I'm just going to start at D, and then we'll work our way up from there.
Okay. Yeah. So go ahead and pop that one up there. I can't see it live because it's a little bit of a delay. So Sons of Behemat, I don't know. What I like about that faction is they're sort of like descendants of the god beasts, which were, if you're not familiar with Age of Sigmar lore, were sort of like take all over the mortal realms until Sigmar came and killed them all. So these guys are kind of like leftovers of some of that. So that's kind of neat, but they're also like just giants. I don't know. What do you guys think about these guys?
Design-wise, I love the models. I think they're great.
Yeah.
Just models to work on as pieces of art, more or less. As a faction, I feel like it's a little thin. When they said they were coming out with a faction for these guys, I kind of thought it was a little odd. There's only like 5 or 6 models in the range. Is that right? It's not a lot. It's very much kind of like their take on an army that's just a handful of models on the table, which is cool. I just like destruction models. So I personally go higher than D. I go like at least C, just because I like the vibe of it. But I do think they're the weakest of all the destruction factions.
Yeah, I think I could live with a C, because, like you said, it's a couple of models. It's the regular Gargants, it's the Mega Gargants, and it's really the 2 kits. And then you can build the Mega Gargants in like 4 different ways or something.
Yeah.
But really, I mean, who's counting at that point?
And just again, I'm coming in kind of as the noob. I mean, I've been playing Age of Sigmar since it came out, but I am not as deep into the lore and everything as what they are. And for those who don't know a lot about it, there are 4 grand alliances within Age of Sigmar. There's order, destruction, death, and
Chaos.
Chaos. Yeah, I couldn't think of the other one. And each one of these factions fall into one of these.
Yes.
And a lot of people tend to like maybe gravitate towards one or more grand alliance because they can work within themselves. And so this one is destruction. Falls under destruction.
And rules wise, it's kind of like almost like a pyramid structure, right? There are rules for grand alliances where you can take like a bunch of destruction models, but each individual faction has their own allegiances and rule abilities that would make you incentivize you to make a list of just one faction rather than pulling from all the destruction factions at once. So there's incentives and pros and cons to doing both. I think in the competitive scene they call them soup lists, where it's just a bunch of a grand allegiance and then faction specific ones.
Okay.
Right. Yep. So I think I'm good with a C on these guys. The new Mega Gargant model's really cool, and so is the other giant Gargant model. But that's about it.
Yeah.
So somebody in the stream, or a good buddy from David over at Man vs. Meeple, said Age of Ultron better not find its way into this list. If it would,
he's got his eye on us.
It'd be around a C or a D. All right, who is this next that's here coming up here?
Let's see. The next one on the list
I think that's
is
Beast of Chaos.
Yeah, you can leave him right there, D.
Wow.
Yeah, if Travis were on stream, he might have some words to say about Beast of Chaos, but I think they have some cool models in the range, lore-wise. Another thing I have to say, I have to preface this whole list with, is I am a huge Warhammer Fantasy guy. Before Age of Sigmar, of course, was Warhammer Fantasy, and I love that setting. To this date, I consider it my favorite fantasy setting. So a lot of my opinions about these factions are associated with how similar they are to Warhammer Fantasy. That being said, Beast of Chaos is, fun fact, trivia, Games Workshop's first faction.
Oh,
they actually made the Beastmen, which is what they were called in Warhammer Fantasy. They still call them that. They're just the factions, just name something different. For another game, Rune Quest, I think maybe once again, wishing Travis was on the stream. But it was models for another game, and they made all these models, and they were all the Beastmen models. They called them the Brew, and then they pitched it to the other company, and they were like, "Actually, we've gone under. We don't want these models anymore." And so they now had a bunch of these models, and they decided to make their own game.
Oh.
Warhammer Fantasy, and that's the origin of it. So the Beastmen are technically the first models they make. They're not the first original models. That would go to the Femir way back in the day.
I wish I knew he was going to say that, because otherwise I would have had the gift that went the more you know image.
Yeah. That being said, I'm not crazy about Beastmen. They're goat dudes. I don't think they have a lot of flavor and design space that other Chaos armies do have. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they are strange because they feel like they should be destruction. Because again, like the Gargants and like destruction in general, they're kind of like tied to the realms. They're like a force of nature. They're like, you know, animalistic in a way. But these guys are devoted to chaos, which is fine because you should have chaos orcs and ogres and dwarves. Well, we'll get to that later, but I don't know. That's always kind of a strange thing. It feels like you could do more with it. Like they could be destruction and chaos or both or something. I don't know. But they're just like, They just kind of feel like they're a faction that's always been kind of tacked on. Even in Total War, they're tacked on. Mm-hmm. Like there's usually not a lot of thought. They're just the Beastmen and they're goats. And they hate everything. And that's about it. That's as deep as it goes.
Before we move on, somebody in the chat just hopped on and said, are you ranking characters? We're not ranking characters. We're just basically kind of doing overall ranking of the factions themselves, more based on lore than gameplay.
Yeah. Not based on gameplay at all. Actually, I can't speak to hardly any of these in terms of gameplay.
Yeah, well, I will say for gameplay, Beast of Chaos will also be a D.
All right, who's up next? Who's this?
That would be Cities of Sigmar. It looks like
Cities of Sigmar.
Adam, do you have any initial thoughts?
Are those different? Cities of Sigmar, what are they compared to like Stormcast?
They're just regular Joes.
Okay, so just regular. Okay, just regular. Okay, I didn't realize there was a faction just Cities of Sigmar.
What Cities of Sigmar is all of the old Empire models that needed a home. They just kind of pushed them into this faction and called it Cities of Sigmar. So that's what that is. So usually all these models are kind of crusty looking. They're from like the 90s. They're old Warhammer Fantasy models. I mean, not much to be said. They're regular Joes. I like the fact that you have regular people in the game. I appreciate that you can play as just some dude who's pulled out of his house and told the man a musket or a shield wall or something. I think that's cool. Mm-hmm. But once again, that's about as deep as it goes.
That's kind of like the Age of Sigmar RPG, Soulbound. The idea that you can just play a regular Joe in that game too.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm as cynical as Adam with this.
What grade would you give it?
No, that's fine. No, I well, that being said, I probably wouldn't give it a D. I'd probably go at least C, or B, even just because I like regular people in fantasy settings. I think that's such a cool design space to explore, and I think usually in a fantasy setting for narrative and drama purposes, a regular person with no supernatural abilities is more interesting to follow than a big wizard or a champion of the gods or what have you. So I like these guys better than both Sons of Behemat and the Beasts of Chaos for what it's worth.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd push them up a little bit. I like the fact that they have the way that they set these guys aside, because they're a bunch of old models mostly, but you have these sort of freaky races or factions like the Idoneth, Deepkin, and the Kharadron Overlords and all that stuff. But within Cities of Sigmar, you still have Darklings, the Dark Elves, the regular Wanderers, I think they're called, the regular Elves, and the regular Dwarves and the humans. They're all kind of mixed together. And I like that there's like a unity sort of vibe with that. Where everything is like, the one weird thing about fantasy to me was always like, why are the Dark Elves always fighting the Dwarves and the Dwarves always fighting the Elves? And there's too black and white, too cut and dry, and I like a little bit of the gray area there where you can have different like motives for combat, and stuff like that, like betrayal as well. Like there's still if you take the Darkling Coven, for example, they still have like ties to Marathi and the Daughters of Khaine a little bit, some of them, and some of them don't, and so it's a little bit murky. So I kind of appreciate that. And these are just folks like trying to get on with life instead of, these super beings. So I'd push them to a B personally, but
not opposed to that at all. And I actually forgot that there were elves and dwarves in there as well. And that's something I also appreciate, is when races cooperate. It's one of the reasons why 40K gets on my nerves. Because
right, exactly. That makes perfect analogy.
It's just to the point of absurdity with 40K, right?
You can't get along with Tau at all?
Really? They seem pretty logical to me. I mean,
see in the chat, somebody said, "Is that the RPG Soulbound, the one that the Lords of Dungeon are playing?" I don't know.
No, they're playing. Well, they're playing not Soulbound. They're playing Warhammer Fantasy.
Okay.
Yeah.
The re-release. Well, the new edition of Warhammer.
Yeah, fourth edition.
Yeah. All right, who's next there?
Speaking of Daughters of Khaine,
Daughters of Khaine.
I like the Daughters.
I do too.
I like the Daughters of Khaine. Once again, Travis has a lot of Daughters of Khaine models. They're kind of the spiritual, as of right now, the main spiritual successor to the Dark Elves from Warhammer Fantasy. And I like the Daughters of Khaine because they're like the Dark Elves aesthetically and kind of in design, but they don't have all the weird hangups that the Dark Elves had back in Warhammer Fantasy, where they just like arbitrarily hated everyone. Like the Daughters of Khaine, they can be sinister and bloodthirsty, but they also, they know how to cooperate and make alliances when it suits them. And it's lore-wise, it's not uncommon to see them in, where you live in your city, because they just kind of walk around as mercenaries or whatever. So I think they're pretty cool. I like the Marathi's sort of influence on them. I think she's a cool character, and that I think she's cooler now than she was in Warhammer Fantasy, to be perfectly honest. So I think they're interesting to me. I would go B or A for Daughters of Khaine.
So y'all see why I brought him along for this, and it's not me that's doing all this talking? Because I mean, these two just know the lore inside and out. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm struggling between A or B myself because, like you said, I don't know. It's something about just like having them be like a murder cult sort of puts me off. But like Morathi just ascended to godhood in the latest, what do they call that? The Broken Realms storyline, right? So that's neat. And I like that she kind of betrayed Sigmar. And then she's like, well, she's trying to get back in his good graces and all this stuff. And so like I was just mentioning with City of Sigmar, like the tension between people and races and factions isn't always necessarily just arbitrarily driven. There's like some real sense of character development, I guess you could say, with Morathi, where she's trying to get more and more power and sort of go up the echelons of everything, and so that's driving her motivations, but she still really hates chaos and stuff like that. I don't know. I think a B is probably good, but to me, like the murder angle is like a little bit like
yeah,
I don't know, like the other elves are more dynamic to me.
Less
characters. So I think these are like the weakest of the elves, but
yeah,
I don't hate them either. So
I would probably agree, but that's by I think it's by a slim margin. But I think they are probably the most one-dimensional of all the elves. I think B's fine for them. I also, as a side note, think it's like in the Broken Realm story that just happened, Morathi betrays Sigmar by just taking a city.
Yeah.
I don't know, that as I just like geopolitics and fantasy settings, so I think it's interesting to have like real, geographic consequences for the actions of characters. I think that's cool. I thought it was cool how they did that. I thought it was a neat.
Yeah, and honestly, that's what's bumping it up too, because one of the cool things they've done here is they advance the story in this setting, which is neat.
Yeah.
I like that. I like things changing.
Yeah, me too.
All right, next one is
Fyreslayers. And see the beard from all the way over here.
So we got our first. We hadn't been saying what alliance each of these are in along the way, in case anybody was interested.
So far, they've all been order except for the first one.
First two.
Oh no,
First two, yeah.
Chaos was Beats of Chaos was obviously Chaos.
Yeah. But other than that,
Daughters of Khaine is order.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Which
And
is
then-
weird. But yeah.
And the dwarves order or
Yes.
destruction.
Yes.
Okay.
As well. Yep.
So our first dwarves.
So in Warhammer Fantasy, the dwarves were just the dwarves. And there was a unit called the Slayers, and lore-wise, they were dwarves who had such a problem with someone that they took up an oath to say, I will literally go die in battle to avenge this grudge or this whatever was dishonor was on my family line for this action. So it was a cult of dwarves who they dyed their hair bright orange and their beards bright orange, and they tattooed themselves, and then they went out to try and find the most glorious death possible. Gotrek is a slayer, right? So when Age of Sigmar came out, Games Workshop was like, people really like slayers. What if we just made a whole faction of them? And that's what the Fyreslayers are. They don't have the same exact lore where they're going out and trying to find the most glorious death possible, but obviously design-wise, they're just strictly designed around the concept of the slayers and fire. They're like a fire themed faction. They live in volcanoes. They ride magma creatures. I think their big thing with the lore is that they're hunting for pieces of Grimnir. Grimnir and Garungi are the two dwarf gods. Yeah, Grimnir, because he was killed a long time ago, and his pieces were scattered around the world, and it's in bits of gold, and they're trying to find it. And that's their main bit of lore.
So where'd you rank that?
Where'd I rank that? I think B is good. I like dwarves. So I think dwarves are cool. I think the Slayers, I think they're very distinct design-wise. Aesthetics matter to me a lot. I don't know, maybe C. I don't know.
Joel can break the tie.
I think I'm leaning C because I like the whole Grimnir story where he went and fought I can't remember what it was, like a giant serpent thing. It was like the size of a mountain, and he died, and the monster died. and then so it's theoretically scattered his essence everywhere, and these dwarves are trying to recover and sort of like rebuild their god in some ways. And I think that's, I don't know, something about that story is kind of neat to me. I don't know why. And I like how there's like, it's like a tie-in to their currency, because they take that Urgold and they turn into runes, which they like embed like as tattoos on themselves to give them power. And so it's not like a greed-based dwarf, like you think of the curmudgeonly greed. So I really like that part of it. But it's kind of a weird looking army on the table. It's like a bunch of little naked dwarves riding dragons.
More close.
The riding the dragons part's kind of neat, but it's just like the naked part doesn't bother me. But it's just like a weird. It's just like very looks the same. They all look the same. Like, and they have like 3 or 4 different melee units. And I was like, well, which one is that? Is that the axe thrower, or is that the berserker, or is that? But they all look kind of the same. I don't know. So for me, I knock them a little because of that. But they are neat though. Like I like the Slayer idea, the honor and the grudges and that kind of thing's cool. So I'd be okay with B or C. I would lean C, but
I'm good with C.
All right.
Yeah.
Next one.
I feel like it's going to get top heavy here in a bit. So
yeah. Next one looks like Gloomspite.
Yeah.
The goblins.
Goblins. So just throw it up in S tier.
Really?
Oh. I like goblins. I don't like them as much as orcs or ogres.
I'm not a big goblins fan, but
I used to not like them, but they've grown on me. I definitely didn't like them in fantasy as much as I like them in Age of Sigmar. It's one of those armies I feel like they just got stronger design wise in Age of Sigmar because they like treat them as their own faction, whereas in Warhammer Fantasy they were just kind of, you know, the orcs playthings. They just kind of kicked them around and they didn't really have an identity of their own. And now they have their identity with, like, you know, there's mushrooms all over the place. They have the trolls and their armies, and the whole Bad Moon angle I think is very clever. I think they have their own identity as a faction that they didn't have before, and I appreciate that. That being said, they're still goblins. So,
and what alliance do they fall under?
Destruction.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point there. I think, like you said, they're just goblins, but I like what you said about how now they have their own faction. And you know what's a weird thing to me is the new army, or the new Orruks, which are sort of the schemy, swampy, you know, like conniving orcs versus the big, heavy, bashing ones. And I'm like, well, where do the goblins fit in now? Because they were always kind of like this schemy, sort of Skaven-y destruction faction.
Yeah.
But now there's like a little bit of competition. But I like what you said, though, because I don't know, they're kind of like just, if orcs took a bunch of shrooms and didn't have any more like strength or power or anything, and then what kind of madness would they devolve into? Yeah, I don't know. It's just, they're kind of silly. And it's funny, I'm reading the Gloomspite novel, and it's kind of neat because it kind of, I look at goblins and I'm like, oh, that's silly. But this shows them as like a very sinister, sort of scary thing. Because and they're very, but the thing is, they're like very Skaven too, where they're very chaotic and crafty and sort of backstabby, but they're just green skinned versions of Skaven that like the mushrooms. I don't know.
Yeah, and it kind of sometimes it feels a little bit like there's a little bit of dissonance in the lore, right? Because they're goofy and they're almost humorous, but then sometimes they want to portray them as these really scary, sinister things, and it's like, but they got the big noses.
Yeah.
I mean, am I supposed to take them seriously? That's why I kind of think the new orcs are sort of like meant to take that design space and turn into something like actually intimidating and scary.
The new orcs I really like, because I do like, it's not like the dumb big brutes.
Yeah,
but they're cunning and smart, but they can also fight too.
Yeah. I would put the Gloomspite B or C, but I lean towards B because I like the doofiness of them. I just wish they kind of leaned harder into the doofiness a little bit.
I'd be okay with B. Yeah.
B? Yeah.
I do like the look of the new models and the new trolls, the Troggoths.
Yeah,
I really like trolls. Like, I wish the trolls were a viable thing that you could just field a bunch of trolls, because I would totally do that.
Yeah, they look amazing.
All right, let's see what's next.
Idoneth.
Oh,
Idoneth Deepkin.
That's D.
So are we using golden buzzers?
That's D. Fish people. Who wants to play
No,
fish
man. This
people?
is S. This
So,
is an S tier.
Really, this would be an S for you?
Yeah, 100%. I love this faction.
And so why? Why? 'Cause I know I give you a hard time about this. I just never got into water elves, but why
Yeah.
S for you?
Because they were forsaken by their creator. So just quick lore lesson. So when the old world exploded and whatnot, all of the elves were swallowed up by Slaanesh. And these were the first sort of souls that Teclis tried to extract from Slaanesh to create new elves, which unbeknownst to him, there were a bunch of elves walking around the mortal realms anyway. But he wanted to sort of recreate the elven race here. And then he said, nah, these guys are no good. And he threw them away. And he was actually just going to murder them all, who he had just created. And that's horrible. That's horrible. They just start off with a raw deal like that. And then, so they ran in fear and they went to the place that they could hide, at the bottom of the ocean, basically. And they sort of harnessed all of this sort of water magic and everything. But some of them are not developed. So they have kind of two sort of castes within the system. Some are like fully developed elves and they call it complete soul, but most of them don't. And then the Marti don't, and the something or other Akaline and the Morsars don't do. So the Namartis have to actually feed on living souls of any living creature, doesn't matter what it is. And so they don't want to be bad, but they have to like do these raids on land and consume souls to stay alive themselves. And it's just a really sort of tragic storyline. I'm like, this is great. I just love this. And, painting them up and stuff, it's neat to kind of just, the aesthetic of them, I think, is really cool. They have this sort of nebulous ether water magic where they kind of have flying fish come out of the ocean and they can fly on land and they control the tides of certain things. And I don't know, it's just neat to me.
Well, what would you say then? I'll go with what you talk. I would probably pull it down, but
I like the Idoneth. It's one of those factions where I look at it from afar and say, that's really cool. I appreciate what's going on there, but I haven't gotten out and bought any of the models. So I have been tempted because they're fantastic models to paint. And I think having them with underwater creatures, that's a huge amount of design space. And I've seen more distinct colorways and patterns and ways of painting these models than probably any other Warhammer model I've ever seen. There's just so much creative space with the models. So design-wise in the hobby sector, I think they're some of the best models out there to paint just because there's so much you can do with them. I mean, Undersea, there's so much inspiration to take there. I really appreciate how they're elves, but elves are often railroaded into the same aesthetics. Mm-hmm. Whether it's like, the elves in the woods, they have the bows, and they're sneaky or whatever, or it's the Elrond elves where they're all stately and they're getting old. And those are pretty much your two flavors of elves. Which one do you want in a fantasy setting? So I appreciate that Games Workshop has come up with this idea that's completely unique when it comes to elves. I think the lore is interesting. I think they have such a neat lore hook that gives them a character that many original factions sometimes lack. That being said, factions that don't have a direct tie into Warhammer Fantasy. So I think they're a great faction. In a personal tier list of mine, I would probably put them in A, at least. But out of respect to Joel, since he's an Idoneth guy, I'm fine putting him in S tier. I'm totally okay.
I think, we're not using the official golden buzzer like we did, but when somebody's passionate about something, let them have it. Geez.
No, I have no issue with putting them up there at all.
Let's see who's next here.
Khorne
D.
Yeah, I'll make an argument for C.
What?
Oh no, yeah. Wait, is that no? Yeah, that's not.
I grabbed the wrong one. There.
No.
Sorry.
I will make. I don't argue D. If it stays D, I won't be upset. I will say some of the lore about Khorne I appreciate, because if you look at all the Chaos Gods, and I always step back and look like, okay, how did this person that gets sort of sucked into this world make that progression and that fall? And the Khorne one is probably the weakest one because it's just pure anger and rage and violence and just the physicality of everything. There's not really anything subtle about it. But sometimes when I've read the lore, not all of it, some of the lore I've read is just like, this is dumb. But sometimes like that teetering of I guess I'm trying to figure out the right word, but the how do you say, like, the lack of capability of dealing with a situation and then resorting to just the physicality of, like, it's written in a really nice way. It's like this person just gave up on the diplomacy of trying to, you know, problem solve and troubleshoot the situation, and they just went completely the wrong way and they went down that path. So it's like, okay, I want to give them some credit for actually making that lore somewhat workable, because on the surface it's just like, it's just silly, you know, it's a miniature game and they just try to cook up something so they smash each other in the face. But they have put some effort into that faction. But if you want to leave it at D, I'm also fine with that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
YD.
Because for better or for worse, Khorne is just the default of chaos, right? Like the Khorne plays the default, I'm a bad guy, to the Stormcast, I'm a good guy. And that just is what it is. Even going back to Warhammer Fantasy, chaos has been brilliant in the way they're able to make some of these narratives. And like Joel was saying, I really like the individual narratives that are at play for chaos and like what can lead someone down each of these paths. And Khorne is just the most basic of them all. Like, I mean, like Joel was saying, you have to have a really good writer to make that interesting.
Yeah.
It's just basic. It just seems like the default to me. And the design is all they're red. They have swords. They have blood all over them. There's skulls.
yeah.
It just feels really basic to me. So that's why I go D2, because it's the only faction where they put out new models and I roll my eyes. You know, because it's like, what can you do with Khorne that hasn't been done already? A bigger axe? Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
And
it's like heavy metal of the faction.
Yeah, but the obnoxious form of heavy metal where like there's no thought put into making, like, no nuance whatsoever.
Yeah, the worst of heavy metal.
Yeah, it's like it's like they all come from a Conan world.
Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah, and as a shout out, this is Travis's big complaint with Khorne.
That's his brother
that I will give, because Travis, he's a big chaos guy, and he loves Nurgle. And throughout Warhammer Fantasy and even over in 40K, Khorne hates magic, and his followers never use magic. There are Khorne endless spells, but there are not
those
Nurgle
aren't spells though. They're not. Yeah. They're what I call. Well, they changed the name of them actually. They call them incantations now. I can't remember what they called them last edition. Well, it's a prayer.
It's something that I know that I was reading the rules that the priest can call those, right? Or use those, right?
Yeah, they're technically called incantations now.
That's why. Regardless, Travis is bothered that Khorne has them and Nurgle doesn't.
All right, who's next here?
Yeah,
Stormcast, right?
Stormcast?
Yeah.
I don't know. I love the lore of Stormcast, and I know personally I would say S or A, because
I do too.
I just love their lore of basically, you know, their souls that Sigmar has brought back to the earth, and especially with the latest trailer, or for Age of Sigmar, the narrative trailer where one gets killed, immediately gets, you know, shot back up. You know, his soul shoots up, and then it'll come back again. And every time they come back, they lose a little bit of themselves. Where first time they come back, oh, I was this person with the family, but every time they eventually are less human, or remember less about their past.
Exactly. So with Stormcast, what my brain goes to with Stormcast is when they first came out and the designs came out, people were immediately like, well, they're just Space Marines. Right, look like Space Marines. They got the big pauldrons. They got face armor, whatever. And I was in that camp. And then the more I read about the lore, Stormcast is just better than Space Marines in every way. Space Marines irritate me. I really dislike Space Marines. And it's one of the reasons why 40K's setting bothers me, is because Space Marines are so inhuman. They're like demigods at this point. They're 12 feet tall. They have 2 hearts. They have acid spit. And they're so divorced from human problems that there's multiple times in the lore you read books and they just like kill people that are in their way just because they don't perceive them. They think they're lesser than, and they all they think about is war and the Empire and other Space Marines, and that's it. And that's all they talk about is that battle. this battle right now, the battle we'll fight tomorrow. And there's no like narrative nuance to a Space Marine. With a Stormcast, that problem is immediately resolved because they remember what it was like when they were a human. So they can relate to human problems. And that pops up in novels and in the lore a lot. But the older a Space Marine gets and the more they die, the less human they are, and the more they might start to act like that Space Marine that sees humans as less than they are and start to have a broader picture of, well, maybe we should sacrifice this regiment of humans if it means winning the battle. Like, so there you have a broader spectrum of stories you can tell. And I think that alone makes Stormcast way more interesting from a lore standpoint than their clear counterpart, the Space Marines.
Yep, I totally agree with everything you guys said. Yeah, all of it. I mean, they're better, more nuanced Space Marine, and they have had in the lore like there's certain not chambers. What's the other word? Storm hosts. I think that's the right word. That are definitely more brutal than the others. So I think it's the ones that are in white or something. I can't remember the name. Light something. Anyway. They're like scary to humans. Like they don't want to see them coming because they've wiped out, groups of people and stuff. Yeah, I like this stuff. I like the whole thing with Nagash in the last edition where he wanted the souls. He's mad at them because like, well, these are dead people. There should be mine. And Sigmar's like, no, I'm going to keep them. And there's a big struggle over that. And there's this really strange thing. I don't want to harp too much about it because I'll go on and like for hours about this one topic, but there's a very strange thing to me in this game where at the end of the day, like instead of these armies fighting over territory and land and riches, they're fighting over these souls of these living beings in a way. And that's just such a profound, I don't know, concept that I'm like, I shouldn't be thinking about this stuff while I'm playing this game. I'm like, it's too deep. I'm like, I can't get into that. Anyway, but I'd throw them at A. I'd be okay with S. I don't really have a problem with them.
I think A's good.
A's good.
A's good.
All right, next.
Kharadron.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know these guys.
They are the other dwarves. There are two dwarf factions.
Are they
Fyreslayers and
order?
Kharadron. They're order, yes.
I was going to put them right in the middle till we decide.
They are Games Workshop's attempt at a deliberate subversion of dwarf tropes, right? So they're still dwarves in that they're driven by greed and enterprise and let's make some money. But instead of being subterranean mining types, they are in the sky and they have airships and they have suits because their currency is, I think, aether gold is what it's called. And it's lighter than air. So they use it to power their airships and they like, they'll do anything for a buck, right? Because they're dwarves. Get it? I really like the Warhammer Fantasy dwarves. And it bothers me that they don't have like classic Warhammer Fantasy dwarves in Age of Sigmar. Since the Fyreslayers already kind of are from Warhammer Fantasy, most of my ire for that is placed on Kharadron. So I tend to be like, oh, Kharadron stole away the good dwarves. But I actually do respect Games Workshop a lot for trying to get creative with the Kharadron and doing something different to make them stick out from every other dwarf you've ever seen. And I think they do a pretty good job of it. The only thing is it's kind of a little weird for me to see because sometimes it gets a little sci-fi. Their design space does because they got like glowing bulbs and guns and all this. So it's kind of weird to see them next to, walking skeletons and elf lancers and all this. So they kind of look a little jarring on the tabletop sometimes. But like I said, I respect GW for trying something different with these guys.
Yeah, I like them. Honestly, I'd put them at S.
Wow.
But you do have a good point about them being a little too futuristic. Like the steampunk stuff I really like. I like steampunk dwarves. That's very clever and creative. That's a neat thing. Their army, I don't really like on the table because it's just a bunch of shooting. And I think that's fine. Shooting is good. I like shooting in the game, but I don't like just an army that's all shooting. I don't think that makes sense. But they kind of are in that corner. But the thing that I really like about them, and it's just because it just cracks me up, is they are like the ultimate capitalist taken form as an army because they have very strict codes and contracts and business arrangements, and it just like permeates every aspect of their life. And to me, this basically they are Games Workshop the army. Because
That's a
they're
good way of
just this
saying
like
it.
giant, massive corporation that just goes along and then just has all of this, dealings with people. And they deal with people. And I'm just saying tongue in cheek, if anybody from Games Workshop ever watches this, I'm just kind of messing around. But they kind of deal with people on the corporate level. Like they don't really, when you deal with a Kharadron, you're not really dealing with the moral compass of a person. You're dealing with like a very sort of objectivist almost kind of thing where you're like, well, like what is your but it's the moral code is written down on paper, so you have no question about it. It's just funny. Like it's just a really hilarious take, and like whoever came up with this, I think is great. But you're right, they're a little too futuristic, and I kind of don't like how the army plays, so I'd probably knock them down to an A. But I just find that the overall creativity of that theme is just super funny to me.
All right.
Yeah. No, the only reason I say that about Kharadron is just because I wish that Dispossessed were their own faction. That's the only reason why I give crap to the Kharadron. I think A is fine for them.
Yeah.
Next one is
now there was a question in the chat, and I just wanted to throw a better answer than I gave in the chat. So somebody is asking if there's the concept of AO, like there is in Forgotten Realms. So there is the concept of the old ones, which is when we talk about the Seraphon, we can talk more about that. But there is sort of that similar concept, and I think there's a similar concept in 40K. Sorry, I just wanted to.
Yeah. Who is this next?
I think it's
The Lumineth.
Seraphon? Is it Lumineth?
The bottom one? Yeah, that's Lumineth.
The one?
Yeah,
Lumineth.
That's right.
Oh, I assume you're going to go up on this one.
I'm big on these guys, but once again, this is just for my love of Warhammer Fantasy, and it just is so clearly like the old High Elves.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why I like them so much is because we've spent years where the only elves in the game were, there were no elves in the game for a couple years, and then there were the Daughters of Khaine. The Sylvaneth are kind of like half, not really.
Yeah.
And then the Idoneth. And so we went for a long time where there weren't any of those classic Warhammer style elves, which used to be a huge part of the setting back in
Warhammer. We remember the Darkling Covens and the Wanderers. Cities now. Yeah.
Just aren't not as a codified faction for the game, rather.
Right.
So this whole time I was like, man, I miss the Ulthland High Elves. I miss the pointy hats and all that crap. And then they came out with Lumineth, and they had all those same design tropes from the old High Elves. And I like that it's not just the old High Elves. Like, yes, they have the same design tropes, but I like the lore tidbit of it's the High Elves got their comeuppance, right? They were too arrogant, and their whole society collapsed because they were all arrogant, pricks, basically.
Right.
And they had to remodel their society around a more humble sort of, that's where they basically had a come to Jesus moment as a race and said, okay, we have to be more focused and level-headed about the way we proceed, or else this will happen again. So their solution to that is to forge a better connection to the realm itself. They live in the realm of light, and they have temples that are dedicated to forming a symbiotic relationship with the spirits of the land, in addition to the classic like academic arcane arts that High Elves are used for. So it kind of combines like elements of almost druidic kind of magic and your classic arcane magic. And I like the design space. The only thing I don't like about the Lumineth is the cow helmets.
Yeah.
I think that's a little goofy. I'd snip them off. But I like the Lumineth. I think they're a very cool take on the classic High Elf style.
Yeah, and I agree completely with that. I think their story is really what attracts me. I'm not really a big fan of the models. I like the models in some ways, and in other parts of it, I just don't.
Yeah,
I don't know what it is. I don't get into it. But you got them at A there. I think I'd be fine with them at A.
I just drug them up.
Yeah.
What would you say?
I think A is good.
A is good.
I think A is good.
Yeah.
The next one was at Nighthaunts.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is the faction that I was always drawn to speak about Nagash earlier. And I don't know, it not only the lore, but the aesthetic. See, I've always been drawn toward anytime I play anything that has to do with like death and bringing things back from the dead. Thematically, I like that. It's always like vampires and stuff. So I've always been drawn to the Nighthaunt, and when Soul Wars came out, that was that the last big box, or was it 2 boxes ago?
Yeah, that was the last edition.
I was playing Nighthaunt before them, but again, just aesthetically, the way they play, that's always been the story and stuff. I mean, they're very evil. I mean, it's not like I look up to these people,
but are they?
Well, I mean,
there's discussion to be had.
Yeah.
I also am a big fan of. I love vampires and gothic horror, and we'll shelve that until we get to the Soulblight Gravelords here in a minute. I just love the simple concept of the Nighthaunts as an army that's all just ghosts. I think that's cool. Lore wise, I don't know. I know that each Nighthaunt, like individual ghost, is the spirit of a person that Nagash has doomed to an afterlife that is an ironic twisting of whatever sins they were guilty of in life. I think that's kind of clever. That's a clever little lore hook right there. I love the colors of the army with the teals and the greens and the blues. I think they look really cool. I think they're fun to paint because you can do like ethereal and luminescent stuff.
Because they're easy to paint. It's another reason why I like them. They're not the hardest things to paint. So I appreciate that.
And I like what that does for a beginner hobbyist too, because it gives them an easy way to do something abstract with a model, like a ghost. That seems like it would be hard to paint, but GW's made a way to make it easy.
Yeah. And in Warcry, they all can fly. So basically, there's no obstacles can stop them. They can go right through everything, which is really cool. Yeah. So, Joel, I've been soaking up all the conversation over here. What do you think, Nighthaunt?
Well, I struggle because I do have an army of them, but I kind of would put them in a C, maybe a B.
Okay.
Maybe you got to use your golden buzzer here, but I like it. And like you Adam mentioned there about their sins and how they kind of have like a reverse twist on whatever their sin was. I forgot about that part. That's actually a neat thing. I don't know, but something about just them being all ghosts is sort of bugs me. But I do like what's her name? Lady Olinder. She's kind of an interesting character there, where one thing I like about all the Nagash ones was all the Mortarchs are very cool. Like they are very much hooked up to Nagash, but then there's all these moments where they say, you know what, screw that guy. I'm going to go off and do my own thing. And she's like that as well. And I can't remember exactly her lore, but she's like the Mortarch of grief. And when she shows up, like her main power in the lore anyway is like just making you feel bad, basically. So I think that's kind of a neat thing. So I could kind of go with a B or C, but I don't know what it is, but I've played with them a few times now on the table, and I'm just like, they're just ghosts. Yeah. I don't know. But
hey, here, we'll split the difference and go B. How about that?
I'm down with that.
That's fine.
Okay. Next.
Nurgle.
Speaking of despair.
Yeah. Just dragging that to the middle.
Yeah.
This is Travis's.
Yeah, this is Travis's faction. But Travis would tell you that he's not the biggest fan of the Maggotkin of Nurgle. Travis is such a Nurgle guy. He makes distinctions between, Maggotkin and demons of Nurgle and Death Guard and all this stuff. I know he is not a personal fan of the Maggotkin because he feels like they're not the best interpretation of mortal followers of Nurgle. I think he would rather they were something a little less obese. I think I don't know. I think part of the design space is kind of basic. I'm using Travis's words here because he's discussed with me about it a lot. Demons of Nurgle, however, I think are very cool. They have very, very crisp designs. I like how Nurgle is the only chaos god that's happy. He's lore-wise jovial and perceives himself as a generous god, and he kind of questions why people don't like him. I think that's a clever take on the chaos gods, which usually depicted as these scheming, and Nurgle's he's just kind of a happy-go-lucky dude. They just want to party. Nurgle doesn't really do it for me personally. It grosses me out to look at.
Yeah, same here.
So
it's like pus and everything all over.
Me personally, I would go like B to C. Sorry, Travis, but out of respect to Travis, I'll give Nurgle the benefit of the doubt.
I don't know, like everything that you said is just, it's such a good take on that sort of aspect of chaos, where the other neat thing, just to add on to what you said, is the way that people get into Nurgle is if they are sick or something, bad happens or they're trapped or something, and it's almost like them giving up on one aspect of life and then embracing this other aspect, which is still kind of life, right? Because the thing that dichotomy of Nurgle versus like the Sylvaneth or Alariel is Alariel and the Sylvaneth are like the life that you sort of probably imagine right away is like green, lush jungles and forests and butterflies and just tons of animals everywhere. But Nurgles are like, well, insects are life too, disease is life too, viruses are life too, and all this stuff. So that's kind of like, if you think about it, it's like, well, that's interesting. Like, you're right, it is life. And you can kind of see yourself maybe going down that path of like, oh, you know what, you're right, Papa Nurgle, that is life. And, like you can make that next step if you're in a really bad situation and maybe you got, a bad flu or something, and you kind of give in to that temptation of that. So that's, they could have just, again, phoned it in. And I think Khorne is more phoned in than Nurgle. Yeah. So what do we put Khorne at? D?
D.
So I could see Nurgle being a B.
Okay.
Yep.
I do like the models, actually. I like they're fun to paint. Like, they just give you all kinds of cool little details that aren't really teeny. They're very paintable details. So that's kind of a neat thing, too. So I think B is good.
Yeah. See, I think the next one is another death.
Yeah.
Ossiarch Bonereapers.
Yeah.
These guys are weird. I kind of like them, but I feel like it's a missed opportunity to reinvent Tomb Kings. I don't know. That's how I felt when it came out. The interesting thing about, I don't know, it's kind of interesting and kind of not. I could put them at C or D. Like, they are rebuilding their army from the bone tissue of other living beings, and they have to go and they show up to the villages in the realm of death and say, give us your bone tithe like every 7 years or whatever it is. And so people have to go and sacrifice somebody to give their bones and contribute their bones to these people. It's almost like extortion, right? Or what do they call it? Protection. Like, you think of the mafia, like they show up and like, I'm going to protect you from all the criminals. Meanwhile, they're the criminals that are protecting your business. And they're kind of the same thing, right? And so that's sort of interesting, but not really. I don't know. Like, it's kind of an interesting take, because I'd throw them at and their models are really weird. I don't know. I'd throw them at D. I mean, I don't know what you guys think.
I'd probably go see. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned my biggest problem with these guys is that they're not the Tomb Kings,
right?
And especially when they came out. I had such mixed feelings, because I thought like the models were creative, but I really like skeletons. But what I like about skeletons is just an army of just regular skeletons. So now that the Soulblight Gravelords have come out and they have just regular skeletons, I'm a little more comfortable with the Bonereapers, because they aren't like just stealing that space. But they're not the Tomb Kings. And that's the thing. And the thing is that, like, design-wise and aesthetics-wise, they even lean into, like, they have kind of a classical Greco-Roman vibe with the way they're laid out. So it even almost kind of infringes on like the Egyptian design space and the Tomb King. It just seems odd to me, because with the Tomb Kings, you could have even done it in Age of Sigmar, right? Because none of these Mortarchs like Nagash, so why not make Settra the Imperishable also a Mortarch who doesn't like Nagash and have his own army there? So I don't know. It just feels like a question mark faction to me. Like, I don't know why they kind of went this way, but
I think they could have done something with the whole resurrection angle of the Egyptian theme or something. I mean, and just twisted it and played with it and screwed it all up and made it funky, like they did with a lot of these other factions. But then they said this is bone tie thing, and then I mean, Nagash has pyramids, for goodness sake. They could have done some, leaned into all that. I don't know.
Right.
Same strange faction.
So next, I believe is
C.
I haven't C.
Okay.
I can go down I can round down.
That's being generous, I think. I don't know.
I mean, I don't have strong opinions one way or the other.
All right, here we go. It's a D.
I don't mind that.
All right, you got anything to say on ogres?
I love the ogres so much. But the thing is, I feel like most people don't love ogres as much as I do. I just love the idea of a race of people whose entire culture and faith and mindset is centered around eating. I relate to that. I really relate to that. And I love the concept of they're probably the most spiritual of all the destruction factions, because they have their society is centered around the holy men of their tribe, who are the butchers and the cooks and the people who make the food. And they have gut magic. I feel like that's awesome. It's called gut magic. It's dope. I love the model. What first attracted me to the ogre models was the big monsters, right? The animals, the thunder tusks and the stone horns, and I love painting those. I love centerpiece models. The maw pots, they have such huge, imposing models that I love to just put on the table. And my Frost Lord on Stonehorn is undefeated when I use him in a list. He's that good, or at least was 2 editions ago. I really like the ogres. I love them in Warhammer Fantasy, and I love that in Age of Sigmar they're more or less unchanged.
So you're saying S?
Fantasy version. Personally, it's an S.
Oh, let's go. Let's start at S and see if Joel pulls it down.
I'll hear out other opinions. I understand that my love for ogres might be a little odd.
Well, it's like his love for Idoneth. So,
yeah, I mean, if you got, I mean, honestly, I'd have a hard time pulling them down from S because you guys let me have Idoneth at S. I really like them too, though. Personally, for me, I don't think they're an S. I do like the whole thing of like they're either eating or they're looking for the next meal. That's it. The one thing that sort of brings me down on these is they haven't at all leaned into the mercenary aspect of it. And I don't know if it would work, but they used to be able to kind of just bounce around. You'd have chaos ogres, you'd have ogres that would like work for the Empire or whatever. And then, you know, then on their own as well. And so they're a little bit too mean or something in this versus fantasy. And maybe it's just a lot of that, like you said, Adam, the fantasy stuff sort of creeping in because they are just full on like just huge bellies that need to be filled at all times. And that's it, which is cool. And it's just funny, you know what I mean? It's just these large masses trying to eat everything.
Yeah, and that's probably
but
why I like it.
I wish they could have had a little bit more rounded off of the edge. But if you want to put them in S, that's fine. I have a big army of them too. So
I will say that in the most recent battle tome that combined all the ogres into the one faction, they do mention a lot about the mercenary stuff, and they'll have taglines about like, oh yeah, this tribe worked for Chaos for a few hundred years. This tribe worked with the Stormcast for however long. So they do kind of pull some of that back in with the most recent lore. But in Warhammer Fantasy, it was very much like ogres were treated as almost akin to dwarves or elves, in that they were just seen all over the place because they were hired out for mercenary services. So, yeah, I love the ogres. What can I say?
Yeah.
All right. Next is, can't read that one.
That's the Orruks.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, these. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead first.
Well, I really like these guys. And mostly it's just the models. I have Iron Jaws is what I have basically, plus the new stuff, the Cruel Boys. And I just like painting these big old orcs, and they're just ridiculously huge armor, and they look like Warcraft orcs, which I know people don't like, but I do like that.
I have something to say about that.
Oh, okay.
Another piece of trivia for you, dear viewers.
Oh, okay. All right. But yeah, I like them. And the Iron Jaws, I like that the Iron Jaws are one-dimensional. For some reason, it bothers me with Khorne, but when it's Iron Jaws, I'm less like, these guys are like the magical manifestation of like power in a way, like fighting power, and just like the physical smashiness of things. Like these guys I can get into and say like, okay, these guys make sense. These are just sort of like plants, because they really don't have a brain, that have grown legs and arms and are just trying to smash their way to the next thing. And they just are growths. They're not even hardly alive. They just have like this sort of driving energy in the force of whatever drives them. And I think that's really cool. And I think they're going to get a lot more rounded out now with the Cruel Boys, which are not just all about the physical smashiness, but also like the, I don't know, the schemy sort of devious smashiness, which sort of muddies the waters of the whole thing. But anyway, I don't think I'd put them higher than B though, because they're pretty one-dimensional. They're just fun to me. I don't know.
Okay, where would you rank them?
No, I love orcs. I'm a big destruction guy, obviously, so I bias destruction factions. But every time I look at orcs, they just make me smile.
So
I agree with everything Joel said, and that's the reason why I like them. They're just big walls of muscle, and they just punch people up. And I love painting them because I feel like they're really distinct and they're really easy to paint because they have a lot of contrast and a lot of coolness. I like the new orcs, of course. You mentioned Warcraft orcs.
Yeah.
It's funny you say that, because when Warcraft came out, the RTS, this was the origin of Warcraft. They wanted it to be licensed by Games Workshop.
Oh yeah,
as a Warhammer game.
Mm-hmm.
So they went to Games Workshop and said, we want to make a real-time strategy game based in Warhammer Fantasy, and we want to use your races. And they said no. And so what Warcraft did is they just made clear analogs of all the races. Even in StarCraft 2, the Zerg or the Tyranids,
The Space Marines,
obviously.
yeah.
All Warcraft and StarCraft races were based on Warhammer or Warhammer 40k races.
What Protoss would have been based on?
Tau.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay,
Exactly.
I can see that. Okay.
So I always have to say this. Whenever you say a Warcraft orc, you really mean a Warhammer.
Yeah.
So I just want to point that
Yeah.
out because I'm a Warhammer snob, and that's
Yeah.
Anyway, I love orcs. I put them in A personally. B is fine because they are one dimensional. But yeah, I love orcs. I think they're great. I think they're funny. That's the thing. They're lighthearted, and that's what makes them cool. In Total War, their tech tree is just called Big Thinking.
Big thinking.
Yeah. So B's fine. B's fine for the orcs.
Job's done.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Next is,
What is that one?
what is that one?
Oh, Seraphon.
Seraphon. God, this might be a hard S for me too. honestly.
Really?
Really?
When I was 8 years old, I found the World of Warhammer book that you had. This was my introduction to Warhammer Fantasy. It was an atlas of the Warhammer world, and it went through all the races.
Yeah.
And I
I
was
have
8
that
years
book.
old.
I'm looking at that book right over there.
Yeah, exactly. So I've gotten to that book when I was in elementary school, and I love dinosaurs, and I was really into dinosaurs back then. And I saw the Lizardmen, and I was like, this is probably the coolest thing that's ever been made on planet Earth. And they're dinosaur people, and they ride dinosaurs into battle. What can possibly be sicker than that? So I have a personal nostalgic tie to the Lizardmen. Now, one thing I do have to say about the Seraphon right off is that I will always point the finger at GW and say we need new source sculpts, and we have for like 20 years, and they still won't do it. That bugs me. But as far as Age of Sigmar, Seraphon, lore-wise, I like them better now after the new Battle Tome came out because they used to not exist. They used to be
Right.
just like the memory of the Lizardmen from the old world that the Slan would materialize whenever Chaos needed a beating or whatever. But in the new Battle Tome, people, I guess, didn't like that. So they've kind of retconned that out, said, well, they were just not real, but now they've coalesced and they're real now, and you can touch them, and they interact with people in the world. So the Lizardmen are back, and they have temple cities and all that. So I like them better now that they've kind of pushed them back to the Warhammer Fantasy Lizardmen that we know. Yeah, I really like Seraphon just because of the dinosaur angle, quite frankly.
Yep. I like him as well. I did like the whole memory aspect of it. But I also like the fact that say, hey, we've remembered them so much that it became reality.
Yeah,
that's kind of a neat thing too.
That's a classic like Warhammer thing to do.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. And I like the models, and I don't have them or anything, but they're very colorful, and it looked like a fun army that you could paint pretty quickly and be pretty fun. And I like the Slann and all that. So just back to one of the questions in the chat a little bit ago was, you had the old ones, and the Slanns have they think they have a connection to them, but they're long gone. The old ones have disappeared. And so the Slann are here to maintain order. They're probably the most order of the order factions, other than maybe Sigmar, but they want the universe and life to keep going as it is, with all the cycles of how things are. And I like that. That's kind of a cool thing. I don't know if I do S on this one. Probably A or B. I don't know. What do you guys
A
think?
is good.
A?
A is good. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I have no idea what that
I
one
have
is.
no idea what this is either.
Skaven, maybe?
Skaven.
Oh,
Yeah.
D.
Make a new tier for F.
Yeah, well, I don't disagree, but when I was reading through the new book, I want to read just a couple of sentences here, and I thought
Okay.
this is the funniest thing I've ever read. Just
In
about.
the new book?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So just a couple of sentences here.
Oh, he's
So,
gonna read to us.
and this is why I do sometimes like Skaven. It says each Skaven firmly believes they are the greatest being that has ever lived. They are concerned only with establishing their own supremacy and willing to do anything to preserve it, no matter how vile. Skaven are highly paranoid by nature, though in fairness, this is largely because all of their peers and underlings are really out to get them. So
I do like that angle. from
that
Skaven.
is super
That
funny.
true.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That is true.
It's funny. So Tony, the co-host on our show, he doesn't play this a lot, but anytime that he ever wants to do anything like Blood Bowl or whatever, it's Skaven. Is there a Skaven army? Can I play Skaven? So he loves the rats. So
Yeah.
there are people that love the rats.
There are people that love they have a very devoted core of fans that Skaven do.
Yes, I do.
Ratmen are not typical in fantasy settings. If you see a Ratman in a fantasy
true.
setting, it probably was inspired by the Skaven.
Right.
So points for originality for that. And now that I'm here trying to talk about it, I can't really articulate why
Why you don't
I
like
think
them?
the Skaven are crappy. I just kind of do. Maybe that's
Well,
the
they're like
point. Maybe
goblins.
yeah,
but
yeah.
they're
Maybe,
rats.
maybe it's like
Yeah.
they just like kind of skitter around. Maybe it's because I feel gross when I look at them because they're just a bunch of rats.
Yeah.
But they do have a funny angle in the lore.
Mhm.
They are humorous, and in Total War, they'll say voice lines that are stupid. You're like, that's the stupidest thing. So I'm cool putting Skaven up to.
There's a Skaven
just
army in Total War.
Yeah, Total War Warhammer. I'm Skaven.
A whole army. Wow.
Yeah, you can play as a Skaven. Yeah.
So you said
one of the
C,
factions.
right?
Yeah, I think C's good.
You said F at first if there was one. Okay.
Yeah, just because it's a meme to hate Skaven so much, right?
Yeah, and I'd almost say B because there's
Wow.
one other thing, because I'll just make my case and you guys can make your decision. So in Soul Wars, when Nagash was trying to build the Great Pyramid and do the whole I forget what his plan was, but it ended up being the Necroquake. The Necroquake happened because the Skavens dug into like the center of the pyramid at the exact right time to ruin everything and cause all this chaos and endless spells and all this stuff. And so because they tunnel through like the realms, they're like digging through antimatter and all this kind of fun stuff. And just through their pure chaotic, almost Tzeentchian like luck, they dug into Nagash's master plan right at the right moment and screwed it all up. And I think that's just great. So you got to give them some kind of credit for that.
Yeah, true. And also that was the exact same reason why the Warhammer world ended in the world that was. It's because the Skaven screwed things up at the exact right time. So they'd have a track record of just doing that. So I think C is good for them. I'll give them an acknowledging nudge. Perchance I will put them on B if I feel more gracious that day.
A pat on the back.
Yeah.
I'm okay with C. I don't really like them either. I don't like playing against them either.
Yeah.
Like you're re-rolling 60 dice now? Get out of here.
I was going to say, so I've never played against Skaven. Is that basically like a Zerg type thing?
Yeah, it's just a bunch of rats on the board.
Yeah.
Who's this?
Slaanesh.
Okay.
Yeah.
I find Slaanesh to be the most compelling of the Chaos Gods. Unfortunately, he has a reputation, and it's because he's the Chaos God of excess and pleasure, right? So where do people's minds naturally go there?
Right.
And I don't like that aspect of Slaanesh that the fan base really plays up more than anything else. But Slaanesh is also the god of vanity and perfection, right?
Right.
So the path to Slaanesh is broader than any other Chaos Gods, because you can be led to Slaanesh just by trying to play the violin the best you can and be perfection at playing the violin, or you're obsessed with the way your hair looks every morning. So I think Slaanesh is the most compelling in that he's almost the most sinister and that he can creep in any way. And I really like that angle to Slaanesh as lore-wise. Like as a Chaos God, I think he can. Some of the most interesting stories for Chaos can be told through the lens of Slaanesh. The models. The most recent ones they've come out with look really good. And I think all the mortal Slaanesh models are really, really cool. I'm not crazy about the demons. I think they're just kind of so-so. I like pink and purple as a color scheme, so I think that looks cool. But yeah, that's where I land on Slaanesh. All Chaos for me kind of dwells in that B to C range. So that's kind of where my brain is right now. Maybe A if I'm like in the mood for it.
I'd give them B.
Yeah.
They're, like you said, it's maybe it's more of the fan base or just the natural inclination to make the whole like lust aspect of it the main thing, which you said it's actually a lot more complex and a lot deeper than that. But I don't know. I mean, the thing is the models do lean into that, the lust side of it. when
Mhm.
they could, I mean, that's fine that they do, but they could also lean into that perfection aspect. And I think that could be a really dynamic range of models where you have this very pristine looking thing, like very clean and like too clean. You know what I mean? Like too precise and too just refined. You know, you like go into somebody's house and there's like too many right angles or whatever. You know, I'm making something up here, but that kind of thing.
Too many right angles.
I don't know.
Too
You know
many
what I'm saying?
walls around here.
Yeah.
There's too many walls in here. So I'd go B, but I think it could be better, right?
Yeah. B's good.
Okay. Next.
Soulblight.
Soulblight.
Oh,
I'm a huge vampire guy.
I'm a huge vampire
I love
guy
vampires
too, so.
and I love gothic horror. And I'm the biggest Warhammer fantasy nerd. We've talked about it. I think for all the vampire lore that I've read over the years, from all the different settings, I think Warhammer Fantasy has the best vampires. The old vampire counts from Warhammer Fantasy were everything I wanted in vampires. They were gothic. They had these huge castles that they lived in. They were cruel and bloodthirsty, but they also realized the value of having humans around to feed off of. They participated in global politics, for better or for worse. And I never in a million years thought that we would see vampire counts come back in Age of Sigmar. I just thought that was lost to time, and I was only ever going to get them in Total War, and that was that. And then they came out with Soulblight Gravelords. And not only this, they came out with new models for skeletons, zombies, the Blood Knights, which are probably my favorite models right now.
Which you're painting them right now, right?
Painting right now. Yeah, I had to go out and buy all these models immediately because I love this range back in Warhammer Fantasy, and they just made it a million times better. The new White King, this is just right up my alley in terms of an army, in terms of design, aesthetics. And the lore that largely kept the same. The only thing that's Age of Sigmarized is the relationship with the Mortarks and Nagash, which they talk about a lot in the battle tome, which is cool because none of the vampires really like Nagash and none of them really like each other. So it's an interesting angle to take. So I really love the vampires. For me, that's a personal S, but for the sake of a global tier list, I would go A, probably vampires.
Yep, I would. I think I don't know. I really don't have anything to add. I think I agree with everything you said. I mean, I like the idea of the different houses of vampires. You know, the Manfred and all those different folks and all that kind of stuff. And like, I love things like intrigue at court kind of stuff, and they have that kind of thing where it's almost a Slaanesh kind of thing where people are trying to go up to upper echelons of the nobility and all that stuff, and then these vampires, especially the Mortarks like Neferata and Manfred and stuff, like you don't want to scheme against them because they will set you into a trap that will just ruin your whole ambition and everything. And I like that these. It seems to me, maybe other than Flesh Eaters, these are like the most anti-Nagash of the Death armies, and I like that there's some tension there against Nagash. It's not just like the whole Death faction is just all headed towards Nagash, even though these guys, they still kind of are, because Nagash is just that powerful. These guys probably have the most free will, right, of any of the Death factions, and I think that's cool. And I like that dynamic and that tension and everything.
Yeah, because that was one thing I thought Grand Allegiance Death was kind of missing, was that every character and every model kind of had this single-mindedness. Yeah, and now with the Soulblights, that's kind of breaking that whole thing in half, and they do have politics and intrigue and all that, which is very cool.
So what's your vote, Joel?
I'd say A.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with that too. I like, yep.
And the models are really cool, even those weird, like
spectacular.
The models, the ones, the mounts,
the Blood Knights.
Blood Knights. Oh my gosh, the detail.
They're so good.
Oh, those are so good. All right, next.
Slaves to Darkness.
Slaves to Darkness.
I would say
that's Travis's also, right?
Oh. He doesn't. He likes Slaves to Darkness. He loves the new Chaos Warrior models. He loves new Chaos Knight models. He to summarize Travis's feelings on the matter, he thinks they've slowly improved Slaves to Darkness over the years. Whereas they used to be just kind of like the Chaos Marauders, like smelly barbarians. They've kind of evolved into like the huge heavy plate armor with the skulls, and that's kind of a cooler angle for these guys. I think looks though is kind of all they have going for them. Lore wise, they're just dudes who like chaos, and There you go.
Yeah. I like the whole Varenspire 8 points stuff. But it is kind of silly, so I probably wouldn't put him higher than a B. I like Archeon's origin story is really cool, but that's Warhammer Fantasy.
Yeah.
He's kind of getting a bump from that. So I could go B or C. Like you said, they are pretty one-dimensional in a way, and the model range is pretty one-dimensional right now.
What would you say, B or C?
I would say C.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Just to balance it out there. I'm trying to make it like a little pyramid here.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
logically
nice little
what all
histogram.
tier lists should be. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bell curve.
That should be a bell curve. Yeah.
Yeah, are you Nagash in disguise? He's trying to make a pyramid.
Uh-oh.
Next
Yeah.
is
What is that?
Sylvaneth?
Sylvaneth.
yeah.
Ugh.
I'm not a tree person.
It kind of makes me just wish for regular wood elves, to be honest with you, because it's hard to come from Warhammer Fantasy and not feel like Sylvaneth is half a faction, right?
Yeah.
Because in Warhammer Fantasy, the wood elves had the tree spirits and the actual elves who fought with them, and they fought together. And now we're just left with the tree spirits, and you're kind of like, well, where did the elves go? So it's a little awkward for me looking at it like that. I think the range is pretty cool. I love seeing people do Sylvaneth inspired by different things, like the autumnal Sylvaneth or the ones inspired by this particular tree. I think that's cool. So I think there's a lot of creativity to be had in the model range, but lore wise, they're trees, and they do what trees do, which is kill people who cut them down. And
Right.
I feel like there was more depth with the wood elves from Warhammer Fantasy than there are with the Sylvaneth now. I feel like.
Yeah. I don't disagree. I do wish they would lean more into the dichotomy between Alariel, who's like your sort of generic life priestess, and Kurnoth, who's really mad that everybody's cutting down the trees and fighting against life. Like he's a very scary, almost destruction-ish type of character, very in tune with the land, but not the life-giving sort of nurturing part of the land, like the Mother Nature side of it, which is what Alariel is. Kurnoth is like the destructive part of Mother Nature. And I think that would be really cool if they kind of leaned into that a little bit more. So you could have an army that was either more Kurnothy, I forget what the name is, that side and her side, and then also have a combination thing. Kind of like what they do with the Orruks, right? Where you have the different aspects of the same coin.
Yeah.
That would be cool. But would you put them at C?
Yeah, I think that's
and it's kind of
C's
one-dimensional.
fine.
Like
I think C's good.
Yeah,
It's got to be Tzeentch, right?
Tzeentch. Yep.
Yeah. I feel like I can't talk much about Tzeentch because I don't know much about his lore in Age of Sigmar, to be honest with you. All I know is what the basics of, Tzeentch. He's magic. He likes twisty nonsense. He's steepling all the time. I think the models look pretty cool, but I feel like there's not a lot of them. Like you have the Zangors, you have the human, the mages or whatever that they came out with a couple years ago.
Yeah, Carrick Acolytes.
Yeah. Those guys. I think they look good. I think they look cool. I just feel like right now, I feel like Tzeentch is the least fleshed out of all the Chaos factions.
He's a hard one to flesh out.
Yeah.
I do like. I have an army of them. I love the models for him. The Zangars, the Lord of Change, the Horrors, and the Flamers, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like that stuff, but I don't really know why I'm into that, because if you really try to penetrate his lore at all, it's just kind of falls apart. It's like he schemes to scheme.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of
okay.
the point, right? Because it's an infinite loop of scheming.
Right.
But whereas all the other Chaos Gods kind of have a purpose and a design for their actions, Tzeentch just doesn't. And once again,
Tzeentch will unravel his own plans. Something. It's just very. It's kind of like it's just like a physicist, the Chaos God. Let's just have an argument that just goes in circles forever.
A fully painted Tzeentch army is one of the most cool to see on the table, though, because there's a lot of
the most colorful,
eye-catching models and colors there. So I do like that.
So we're dropping it then.
I did B or C would be fine with me. I mean, I do really like it, but I can't defend it.
I think B is fine, and I think that's thematic, right? Because we have Nurgle, Slaanesh, and Tzeentch all in B, and then Khorne in D. I think that fits.
Sure.
And the last one of the night is
It's technically Legion of Asgore, which you can't buy models for anymore.
I mean, so I don't even know how we do this. Like, do we do Warhammer Fantasy Chaos Dwarves? Or
Well, the thing is they have dropped several massive hints over the last couple of weeks that they are
most
coming out.
notably in the new box, right?
Yeah.
Of the Hobgoblins Grots. Yeah.
Right. And if you read, there's a little lore section in the little book pamphlet thing, not in the rule book, but if you read the entry on the Hobgrots, it just flat out spells out these guys are like the liaison between the Orruks and the Chaos Dwarfs.
Yeah.
And they do reference them a lot in some of the Warcry stuff and some of the Varanspire stuff. So these guys are all hanging out with Archaon, and they're kind of like the crafters and the builders for Chaos on that side. And there was a huge leak the other day. I don't know if you guys want me to bring it up or not. I mean, I didn't leak it. Yeah, it's been posted publicly. If you don't want me to bring it up, let me know, and I won't say anything. Okay.
Unless the chat doesn't want to hear or something.
Yeah, if you don't want to hear it, then just turn it off because it's kind of spoilery if it's true. But this place that has been leaking the stuff has been right like 100% everything. So, but it's far enough in advance. I think if Games Workshop hears it and they wanted to be clever, they could like, well, we're going to change it now. So the Chaos Dwarves, the Duarden, are building a giant gun, and they're going to shoot it at Azirs. Think of like a Death Star type of weapon, or what was the thing called in Episode 7? Star Killer base.
Yeah, base killer or star killer. Yeah.
So they're going to try to since Azir is locked away and nobody can get to it through the realm gates. They're like, you know what? We're just going to build a giant gun and we're going to shoot it and blow a hole in the shield around it or whatever, and then people can invade it that way. And I'm like, that's so stupid, but that sounds amazing. I want to be part of that. And I love the aesthetic of what it used to be the Age of Sigmar Chaos Dwarves, but I also love the aesthetic of the old ones, the Warhammer Fantasy stuff, because with the big like Russian top hat things. And I like these guys similar. These are like the reverse almost of the Kharadron on the other side of that coin, where the Kharadron are like the capitalists. These guys are like the industrialists. They just are like makers and they're craftsmen, but too much. Like they just want to keep making and making and making like the most powerful and just destructive weaponry and items. So they just have leaned too much into their craft and just gone nuts.
Well, that's the typical kind of dwarf trope, isn't it? You know.
Yeah, the idea behind,
but I mean, to the point of evil.
The idea behind Chaos Dwarves and Warhammer Fantasy was that they are dwarves taken to the point of absurdity.
Got it.
Right, like they were dwarves who fell to the worship of chaos, and that made them kind of like mega dwarves, and like their dwarfness was almost amplified. I think they could make Chaos Dwarves and Age of Sigmar very, very cool.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to seeing how they do that. I'm glad that we've at least finally got like hardline confirmation that they're hanging out. So we'll see them in the future for sure.
So where would y'all rank them?
Oh, it's hard to say right now.
Yeah, since they're kind of dead, I'd put them at maybe a B tops, but C.
Yeah, C.
But with room to grow, you know what I mean.
That'll be an asterisk on the tier list.
Yeah.
Well, there's your definitive list, and
I love how the only two S tiers are Joel and I's factions.
Yeah. So I was getting ready to say, if can I make an adjustment since that's the case? Can I do this?
Yeah, that's fine.
What did you do? I'm lagging behind there. What did you do?
I moved Nighthaunts up to S tier.
No, you pulled.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I just grabbed the wrong ones. It is.
I'm fine with that. That's fine.
These. The Nighthaunts were down here in B.
Yeah, they were in B.
Nighthaunts suck.
I'm dragging them all the way out there. So
there's a big old asterisk on this.
So the factions everybody plays now are in the S tier.
There you go.
Yeah. So yeah, that's cool. But hey, it was kind of a bell curve. What you expect?
Yep, that's a healthy tier list, I think, shape wise. I feel like if you posted this to any like Age of Sigmar online communities, they'd probably be like, "What?"
Yeah,
I like it. I can't find any fault. I'm sure if I sent it to Travis, he'd think it was cool too, minus Nurgle. But
yeah, good. That was a good chat. I love talking this lore. It's a lot of silly. It's a lot of fun at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's what I like about Age of Sigmar is that it doesn't take itself seriously. 40K takes itself way too seriously, to its detriment. And
it kind of does, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I like that Age of Sigmar has kind of like that kind of jaunty tongue-in-cheek vibe to everything. I think that's very, very cool.
So why is there so much more? It seems like 40K players. It's just because that's the old school game.
Because people take themselves too seriously.
I like 40K. I've got a Death Watch army. I enjoy playing.
Yeah, 40K just has a lot of momentum behind it.
Yeah.
It has a lot of pop culture momentum, I should say.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people who are posting 40K memes and reading lore who have never painted a model or picked up a book in their life. So
Yeah.
that's just the way it is.
And I guess in the scheme of things, Age of Sigmar is very young
Extremely.
compared to very, very young compared to 40K because
yeah.
it's only been what 6 years?
Let's see, come out at 15. Yeah, 6 years.
Yeah, 6 years.
6 years. So.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that somewhere along, we keep mentioning Warhammer Fantasy. There's been a tease. What was it in 2020?
Yeah, about the
When they teased something, Warhammer Fantasy's coming back somehow.
We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see.
The Street Talk says it's 2023 when Old World's going to come out.
I see that.
So 2 years.
Do you think it'll be rank and file?
I hope not.
I mean, they already
probably.
said square bases, so how could it not?
They did say square, didn't
Yeah.
they?
Mm-hmm. I don't know. The scuttlebutt that I'm seeing, which is pure speculation, there's no inside knowledge here, is that it's going to be like an epic scale, like 15 millimeter, so lots of smaller units where you can. Yeah, which I can see because it's if they want to lean into the Total War type of thing, where you just have like a ton of units.
It would at least be a different design space, right? So it wouldn't be like the same game as Age of Sigmar.
Right.
It would have a different sort of play style to it.
Right. But I don't know. I don't dig the rank and flank, but I don't know. Lots of people
I've never tried it, so I can't say for sure. All I've done is play Age of Sigmar on 40K, and then I played Total War. But to me, Total War kind of feels like its own thing. Mm-hmm. So I'll give it a shot if that is what we wind up seeing. But I'm not sure. Like I can't say on whether or not I like it better or not yet.
Do you play Total War, John?
You know, I've tried to play that game a few times. Like I've gotten it out and then like let me try this again. And I just cannot. I really want to like it, but I can't get into that system for some reason.
You need to play with him.
It's pretty arcane. It's pretty arcane. It's one of those games where you have to commit to not understanding it until about 5 hours of gameplay, and which turns a lot of people off. And I get that. Like, who wants to put 5 hours into just understanding how to play a game? But,
well, let me ask you this one. So what I've seen is I talked to this guy Steve, from the Secret Cabal, Marty, and his thing is he actually doesn't really do the combat that much.
Yeah,
he just kind of does the empire management stuff and just says, "Oh, let's the combat just do its thing." And that's not how I'm approaching it. Like, "Oh, I want to do the combat and get into nitty gritty." But I don't know. Maybe I'm approaching it wrong.
And no. The great part about Total War is that you're free. You can do either war, right? So it has an option for you can go into the campaign and just do the campaign and the management of the empire and just hit the auto resolve button every single time, or you can just say, forget about the campaign, and I'm just going to roll up battle after battle after battle, and you can make your own roster, and you can adjust the enemy's roster, and you can just do that, or you can do a mix of the two. So it has options, and it supports both ways of playing.
Yeah, I mean, I never even thought to dabble in that, just random skirmish map and just roll up like a huge dark elf army and just go for it.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to like introduce yourself because you can deliberately stack the odds in your favor, so you can just like practice moving units around or what have you, or managing magic or whatever.
I know what I'm downloading again tonight.
Oh well, you'll get to play it tomorrow then.
It's a big game.
It's a huge game.
It is.
It's huge, and it's going to get even bigger.
And obviously, I mean, he and his brother are pumped because 3's coming out. Brothers are pumped because 3's coming out.
That looks good. When does that come out? When's the release date there?
This year, but we don't know when.
Okay.
Yeah, they've said that. I think they gave vague hints to like third quarter, around August, September time. But I expect it to be delayed at least once, quite frankly.
So, side thing, when you going to be able to get the new Age of Sigmar to the table, Joel, to be able to play? Got any plans?
Good question. I'm in the middle of painting it right now. I'm gonna try to have it painted up here by next week sometime, I think. And I might set up a game of it and play it myself. I am planning to go to the shop where I like to play, and there's everybody's hyped for the release day, so there's gonna be some kind of tournament or day scheduled here probably in July, and I'm definitely gonna whenever that is, I'm gonna go to that. Yeah,
and we hadn't sit down and played yet, but I'm assuming soon we're gonna start chunking some dice just to see how the system works.
I'm gonna put my foot down here. I will not play with you until you prime at least the models.
No, I'll prime. I meant to prime today. I meant to prime.
I even said I'm not gonna play with you until you get them battle ready.
Really? Or table ready? Lord.
I can have the orcs table ready in like 2 days.
But y'all are so much faster painters than what I am.
Don't you guys have contrast paints?
Easy. Yeah, just you got the gold primer.
I did buy the Retributor gold primer.
That's what I did.
Yeah.
Oh, you
but
did?
That's deceiving. Here, I'll show you one guy. See if it'll focus on here. This guy's pretty much done. It's hard to focus. Hang on. These guys I like. Yeah, he's pretty well done there.
Did you use the Retributor gold?
Yeah, this is Retributor, and then I went over the blue is right on top of the gold, so it's kind of teal. You can kind of see that.
Yeah, I can do that. I can knock that out. I'll knock that out.
This one I painted the Wraithbone, like the base paint over it, and then went back over it with the thing.
Yeah. I'll start working on it. I'll get it.
Yeah.
But you're at home during the day where you can have a chance to paint. I'm not.
This is true.
But yeah, I'm anxious to see we hadn't played Age of Sigmar in a long time. We've been playing Warcry instead.
Mm-hmm. It's just easier to play Warcry.
Warcry is great.
But I saw that, I think I told you too, that the General's Handbook's already going to come up on pre-order this week. So we have to order that so we can play with our other stuff. Yep. I'm trying to think out, did you see anything else, Joel, that on the pre-order that was like, you should probably get this too?
The only must I would say would be the Generals. I got the battle board thing. I like their battle boards.
Oh, is that where, because you can put it together and make the standard size Age of Sigmar? Yeah.
Oh. I don't think you need that. Like I've got a table and I'll just mark it off, but I like it because it was all swampy and stuff. And I don't really have any, mats that are like that color and stuff. I was like, oh, pick that up.
Did you like the new paints? I heard they're going to be hard to get.
I heard there were gonna, be a shortage here coming out.
Yep. The woman who has the Sword and Shield YouTube channel, she runs a game store.
Oh, the gal in Canada, yeah.
Yeah, she was told they're only going to get 6.
Oh wow!
And they're allocating 6 per store, so that's why I said I didn't know if you wanted there's an Orruk paint, right?
Mm-hmm.
A new one that's coming out. I didn't know if you'd want that, but
it's green. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
I got like green. It's all good.
It's a different green, but you can add a little white or black and shade it.
Yeah, easy.
Yeah.
Cool.
But, yeah. Well, thanks, guys. It's going to be about dinner time here.
Yeah, that was fun. That was a lot. Like I said, I was sitting here, I was learning a lot. I said, why isn't Marty saying anything? It's because I was kind of navigating the waters with them just to hear all the different types of. I know some of it, and the ones that I knew about, I chimed in on. But you guys like to read I know Joel likes to read the novels. He buys the Games Workshop novels, and you do too.
I read a couple novels. Joel definitely probably reads more novels than me. My thing is battle tomes. I can't stop buying battle tomes to read exclusively for the lore. I'll buy battle tomes for armies I never will play.
Can you hand me the book real quick? Yeah. I mean, for those who haven't seen, so this is the new book. Now, this is in the starter box that's coming out. That if you look in the pre-order, you just want the rules. It's not this cover. It's a different cover.
Oh, just flex on them, why don't you? Ooh.
Well, no. I'm just saying. I'm just saying if they go to pre-order it, the book by itself, I think it's this art, but it just has a title
it's like
at the top. Yeah, it looks just like that.
Yeah.
But what I was going to point out was I want to show how much of this is lore and how much. Here it is. I found it right here. So this is 300 something pages. And basically, this is lore, and this little bit is rules. So that's how most of this book is dedicated just to lore.
This is why you can download the rules for free.
Yeah, because I think the rules is a 44-page PDF.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's right. Not all this is rules. This is literally the core rules.
The core rules, and they have narrative play rules, and then they have some point values and stuff.
Yeah, I mean the core rules really in this little book is just that right there.
Yeah.
So
anyway, it used to be 4 pages, now it's 44.
Yeah, I do remember that it was a fold out. So I think I don't know that the rules changed that much. They just made a little more detail, probably better
Yeah.
understand.
More detail.
Yeah, the gist is the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, Joel, thanks for letting me come in on your channel. And
Yeah, thanks for letting me in on your
participating.
Twitch.
This was
Yeah.
fun. So basically, for those who are just now tuning in, we're basically simulcasting on 2 separate channels, on Joel's YouTube channel and on our Twitch channel. And Adam, thanks for popping in.
No problem.
And you'll probably hear
Yeah.
from him again if you listen to our podcast, because when we play the game, I always get him to come on and do a little segment with me about the new rules and everything like that, because Tony does not play this game, and I want somebody to be able to play with me and talk about it. So,
Yep. No, it was great talking to you guys, and appreciate you having me on Adam's Twitch channel. And
Thanks for joining us. Yeah.
yep. All right. Good night,
All right,
everybody.
thanks everybody.